Chris, thanks a lot, and we are all yours.
Thank you very much. Leonardo, Antonio, congratulations on your fantastic presentation of this morning. I must say, almost too good to be true. I don't know if you agree with that, but in my opinion, and I have a lot of experience, 30 years in procurement, I can say, well, that's not too bad. But if you hear what they are doing, that's fantastic. They will need a lot of energy to proceed with that. Telling something about the supply chain. I was asked to tell you about innovations in the supply chain. But first we have to introduce what is a supply chain. The supply chain we are in, if you talk about a supply chain, you will look at your own company and say, well, we have some procurement, we do some production, and we have clients, and that's our supply chain. But be aware of the fact that you all have your personal supply chain. Starting with myself, I was scheduled for the afternoon, but my personal time schedule said, you have to be at home tomorrow at roughly 3 o'clock local time. That means that I have to leave here 1:30. That's my supply chain. You have your supply chain. You are here, you expect something from me, you do something with that, and hopefully you add some value to that, and you use it in your company doing changes or whatever. So the simple definition of a supply chain is you get something, you do something with that, and you give it to another one. And hopefully he likes it. That's the simple word of a supply chain. I have a supply chain here. I have a time schedule to make. Therefore I asked Flavio to give me a signal when we are at 3/4 of an hour. You need trust. If I cannot trust Flavio in saying, I'm so enthusiastic about the process we are talking about, I can talk hours and hours, and I cannot manage my own supply chain. That's what it's all about. Make it simple, and I will try to do that. And I will start with the fact, wouldn't it be nice that we all could say that we could improve the business? And I put a small notice under it. For a lot of us, especially if I look at the European circumstances, innovation in procurement is in fact always translated in, are we possible to reduce the prices? And that's what it's all about. I'm trying to speak a little bit slow because those ladies has to translate it. And their supply chain is a problem too, because I'm not a native English speaker, and they get something, not completely 100% correct. They add value to it, they translate, and hopefully you have something in what you can use. So also these ladies, they need an applause, and I don't think you ever did before, but I will ask you later on. You see, you need to be a mechanical engineer to know where to be. That's my education. I'm a mechanical engineer. Changed over to procurement. And why? Simple. My drive was I want to have possibilities of doing studies. And in procurement it was possible. I was a mechanical engineer knowing exactly what they thought about procurement. All these ridiculous people always talk about money, but always be a delay for the business. That's what they think about procurement in the mechanical engineering. And I'm afraid it's the same for all of you. I changed over to procurement, and I went to Navy and ISVA, and ISVA is a part of Navy. And later on, when you get older, when you get experienced, you're changing over to coaching, because it's all going so fast, you don't manage that anymore. As you see, I'm born in 1952, and every procurement manager can calculate. So I don't mention my age, but you can calculate that. I'm very interested in human being, and based on that, of course, also in change management, because change management is about the human being. My experience, as said by Leonardo, Director of Procurement, and it's always difficult. It's a procurement turnover of 2.1 billion euros. And I must honestly say, I really don't know what it is in Brazilian money, but it's something times 3 or something. Is that correct? So 6.5 times 5. Oh, it's 5 billion. We don't look at a billion less or more. At present, since the 1st of September, I'm owner, director of Orgon, Procurement and Coaching Solutions, and in that case, I'm director of a small electrical installation company. Innovations in the supply chain. I would like to start with some statements in the procurement. If you want to innovate, you have to innovate in yourself. Perhaps it's a disappointment, but it's absolutely true. You have to innovate in yourself. Don't watch at the others, watch at yourself. And if you are innovating in yourself, do your studies, do your training, it makes it much more easy to innovate in the total process where you're in. As heard in Vale, your IDs are fantastic. I'm sure you all have your IDs. But how do you sell them to the internal client? It's the way you sell that ID. That's important. Because if you have a great ID and you're not able to sell it to your internal client, you won't be successful. And that's lost energy. In my experience, it's clear that procurement isn't always the most important department in the supply chain. Also disappointing, because we all think we are the best, we do the earnings for the company, but sorry, that's not true. We are not. But if you are able to implement your IDs, then you can be the most important department in the supply chain. You will appreciate already that I'm not talking about details in procurement as the people from Validate. They are so experienced in figures and what all is done and what the suppliers are and what they earned and what they bought. I'm much more interested in 2 parts. Firstly, the mindset. What makes you the procurement manager you want to be, and what is the operational result later on. So the first part will be especially on the mindset, and that then we're talking about the present position of procurement in the supply chain, about the bottlenecks you have. I will tell you something about my experiences, the 2 types of the supply chain, in my opinion. And I hope you think different about that, because then we have a discussion later on. And of course, the conflicts between all these supply chains. If you hear what I said about the supply chain in the introduction, you will appreciate that it's impossible. How many are we here? 100? That all these supply chains, all these interests in this supply chain are the same. So it's absolutely normal that there will be conflicts. So accept that. In the second part, I will give you some operational ideas about the possibilities, and what we can expect from these innovations. What's in it for the client? Because we think, as procurement, it's important what it is in for us. But that's not important. What important is what's in it for the client, for our client. I will tell you something about the lessons learned. I'll give you some examples, and I hope we'll have a discussion later on. It won't be a program saying, well, now slide A, this is the overview, slide B is the bottleneck, and slide C is the experiences. It's going through another. I'll take you in your own situation. And don't mention them, because then we get a little bit strange conference. But you have your IDs. And if you take these IDs, can you tell me, or can you tell yourself, how did you sell these IDs to your internal client? And was that an internal client, or was that external? How did you sell your IDs to the client in your production process? Or did you tell that to a client of your company? Or even did you discuss it with your supplier? And what was the difference in the reactions? Because I can imagine that the internal client reacts quite different to what a supplier reacts. And the question is why? And I think if you ask you all know, you know exactly what's happening, but you don't know how to solve that. And the difference, of course, in the results. The most heard reaction when you have these discussions, and I really don't know if Calimério is known in Brazil, but I think so. They are strong and powerful. I'm weak, and that's not fair. That's the most heard reaction in Europe when we ask procurement officers, why didn't you manage to get innovations in the total process? And it will be clear that you have to change that figure, that mindset. The most simple sheet of a supply chain. Suppliers, your internal organization, and your customer. And the suppliers deliver to purchasing, we do something with that, and we distribute to the customer. If the world was so simple, we wouldn't need this conference. Because what's happening, our world is much more complicated. Because we have suppliers have their ideas about what should happen in our production. And I must meet the first production officer who accepts that the supplier is coming in and say, hey man, you're doing wrong. You have to do it in this way, and you save this kind of money. He can be true. It can be absolutely true what he's saying, but the production man will not accept that. I would like to take you to the internal supply chain. If you look at, and we saw more or less the same in the earlier presentations, this is what's happening in a normal project. You have some provisional specs. You get a question. Make an offer for whatever, a pump or a production plant, or what you can think. There will be provisional specs. You do some sourcing, final spec selection, and so on and so on. That's the normal process in an organization. In detail, it will differ, of course, but that doesn't matter. Looking at that, at what moment the biggest costs are determined? in what stage of the project the costs are mentioned. I made a line of that. And it's not 100% correct, but gives you an idea. And that line is something like that. And the reason is that making the provisional specs, engineers do not know exactly what they have to build. So what are they doing? They call a procurement man. And he cannot answer because he's in a conference. This is roughly the line. And if you look at your own situation, and you have to draw the line of the contribution of procurement, it will be clear that it's quite different. Make up your mind and see what, if it's equal or not. In our circumstances, this was the contribution line of procurement. And the reason, when they made the provisional specs, procurement was solving the problem of the earlier projects, because that's always in that stage. The call-off didn't go well. We had the wrong material. We had it not in the right time. We had a guarantee discussion. It was too late. And procurement always had to solve that problem. So the contribution of procurement is always in the back area of the project, and never here. And when you are in that stage, the engineer said, well, of course, I had some discussions with the supplier, but I told him that he has to go to procurement to get the final order. And saying, well, my business is done. But an engineer doesn't understand that if he says, I made an unofficial question, that the answer is sometimes very official. Because he's not interested in it. His drive is, I want to have the information. And he needs an offer, otherwise he doesn't get the information. And it's sure that it's conflicts. I will tell you no secret. And if you look at my point of view, how the external supply chain is going through that, that's starting somewhere in the selection and in the material sheet, there is our client who has something to say. So in the theoretical sheet we had, simply supplier, purchasing, production, distribution, and customer, there's another line going through it. And that makes it very, very complicated. Surely not 100% true, but in many cases it is. As already said, we all have our good ideas. There's no discussion about that. But when we focus on the goal that we want to be an important part of the supply chain as procurement, it could make sense that we have to use another way of selling our ideas. And what we want is that our good ideas are heard by the internal client, knowing that he can save money with that. Because at the end, we all want to save money. That's no discussion, that's no secret. We are here to earn money for the company. The first step also is, don't be like Calimero. Stay in the positive circle. And I would like, what is the reason I'm telling you this, is that it happens so often in procurement, especially when I'm talking about the Dutch procurement people. Very often they stay in frustration, aggression, and come to a negative energy circle. And then you get the Calimero effect, say, well, it's not my fault. When I ask them, why did we buy it at that supplier? Well, not my fault. Engineer decided, and I had the possibility to change that. That's very safe. It's always the fault of somebody else. And that's what we have to change. That's what we have to change in our mind and in the mind of our procurement employees. That's important. As procurement officers, you know this, but you have to learn it to your employees. And that means that it's absolutely acceptable that you're frustrated sometimes. Even it's acceptable that you are aggressive. But stay in the positive way. Use it for respect. Use it to get clean. You're all interested in football, I hope, because then you understand exactly on that point. That was the final of the World Championships. Not the last one, because that's very frustrating for you, of course. But the one before, between Italy and France. What happened with Zidane? That was that point. He heard something, never what, but he got, no, it wasn't even not aggressive, it was even aggressive plus. And he gave that hat, how you call that, he did something stupid, in fact, but he was absolutely clean because he walked away from the playfield without any problem. So that's a very important point in your behavior as procurement. So what to be done is be positive. Be positive what you achieve. If you believe in your ideas, be positive and you can sell it. Because you want to be taken seriously. If not, you're not here. You want to be taken seriously. You want to be a professional partner. And what I mean with that, I come back later. You saw the scheme, you want to be involved earlier in the process. Because then you can help to decide. You want to add value. You want to get something, you want to add value, and you want to give it to somebody. And you want so many things. The only thing you have to do is think about what you want and make a focus of that and make a structure of that. I heard the word in the earlier presentations, structure. Structure will come back in my presentations very, very often. And sometimes you will think, well, is there nothing else than structure? Yes, there is, but it is very important. And it leads you to a goal. Focus on your goal. And we made, in Impact, we made a mission statement saying that procurement wants to be the best partner for the internal client. In order to realize the best integral result for the internal client in money, time, quality, and the lowest risk. That's what we want. That's what we are focusing on. So procurement doesn't want to be a department. It wants to be a partner in the supply chain. Another interesting figure, what you need to go through that process is this one. I don't give you the full details because that needs another 2 or 3 days. The simple thing is you have a plan, you have a process, and you can measure. You are thirsty, you want to get a cup of coffee, yes or no, and you measure, did I get a coffee, yes or no. 100 times a day, you do this. When you do this, you are in control. The problem is that there are a lot of diversions, things which brings you off this plan. About the coffee, somebody's calling you. Just when you decided, I want to get coffee, you get a telephone call. You get a question, you get whatever. It is a diversion. It reduces your control. You can be happy because at the other side, there are also things, processes, which increases your control. That somebody say, well, I will take the coffee for you. It's a simple example, but it makes clear what I mean. So if you're able to make it possible that all diversions are used and changed to increased control, then you are in control. And this means you have structure in your approach. It sounds a little bit ridiculous all today, but at the end you will see that it comes together. That you need the structure to get done what you want to get done. Because what is happening? I told you already that everybody has his own ideas, his own reasons to think like how to act in the supply chain. Everybody has his drivers. You have your drivers, I have my drivers, everybody has. And the stupid thing is that we think that we know the driver of the other. And that's not true. So if you are in a discussion with somebody and you're arguing, if you know exactly what he thinks and what he wants to achieve, then the discussion is going very easy. But if you're not aware of his real drivers, then the discussion is very difficult. And you have to be aware of that. And I mentioned a few that's out of the intellectual area of our environment. They told us these are the most upcoming drivers of a person. And you will recognize a few, and you will think, well, what the hell is that? But why do you need that? This is the final difficult sheet, and then we are going back to the easy ones. The process I just mentioned is drawn a little bit different. You want to do something, you go to